In the black expanse beyond their world, the crew of the exploration vessel Sekrul hung in a fragile orbit around a dead planet. They were a people shaped by endless night, the light of their home dimming centuries ago as their sun neared its own end. Their star charts were filled with tombs of worlds turned barren. When their sensors picked up the faintest pulse on an ancient radio frequency, none dared to breathe too deeply. The transmission was weak and warped with time, like a candle flicker at the edge of an unforgiving darkness. It came through only after the Sekrul's AI keyed the signal with every noise-filtering filter and a layer of smoothing algorithms. Even then the voice was threadbare, strained to whisper, a voice from a home they thought unreachable. In the control chamber, engineers leaned forward, eyes shimmering as though they had found a story. Data streamed across the console in strange curves and rhythms. The hum of machines grew as they rushed to decipher the signal. Heartbeats thrummed behind synthetic skin. Circuits glowed warmer. This was not just static, it was a thread of memory reaching across void and time. As the algorithms sorted the ancient patterns, the voice crystallized from chaos. The speakers crackled to life. A single human voice, its tone both weary and clear, began to speak in a language long dead. Gentle but haunted, the woman's voice spoke to them. "I don't know if anyone is out there to hear this. My name is Mira. If this message reaches someone, anyone, you will know we were here." There was a pause as if she listened to an echo of her words in the emptiness of her world. She spoke slowly, with measured breaths, as if unsure how many there were to hear. "They call it the Great Silence now, this darkness that swallowed the stars. I speak to you from the end of all things." The signal warped slightly on a long sentence, but the emotion carried through. She did not say goodbye. She simply continued, as if stitching together the very last tapestry of her kind. Every word resonated with the crew as the voice unfolded its story, page by fragile page. Mira spoke of Earth's final days, once bustling cities lying empty, glass towers hollow beneath ash-filled skies, forests turned gray and crumbled to dust, oceans stolen by a sun gone mad, boiling the waters into steam. She described lonely survivors huddled by dying fires for warmth, families listening to the hush of a sky bereft of birdsong. Every detail burned like a memory into the minds of the aliens who studied each nuance. Data streams flashed as impossible images, canyons of concrete now flooded with fog, children's swings swaying alone in breeze, scenes that their sensors translated from emotion rather than pixel. The room felt colder with each sentence. The voice trembled, as if echoing across both time and soul. A biologist among them, with eyes like flickering coal, felt an ache spreading through his veins, metal and flesh alike. Talish, a poet from the southern ice plains, recognized the cadence of sorrow in those words. She knew all too well that the voice spoke not just with sound but with the weight of everything beloved. She closed her eyes, letting the story wash over her, as if these faint words could paint color onto the memory of a vanished world. Each syllable was as gentle as falling snow, yet heavy as lead. Mira's stories were filled with both detail and wonder. She recalled how, in the calm before the storm, spring bloomed one last time in the cracked soil of forgotten parks. I remember placing daisies on her grave, even as the horizon glowed a terrible red. She said softly, memory and heartbreak tangled in her tone. Those flowers wilted without a trace of rain. The aliens pictured that grave, an ancestral tomb painted by firelight, the wind carrying petals into night. The sky fell and the grass burned, and still I thought of hope. She whispered the word hopeful, so it was more felt than heard. Telish imagined daisies living against all odds, and tears slid silently down her own face. The word hope rippled across decades to reach them. Mira turned her gaze skyward on that last night. "I want to tell you about the stars," she said with quiet resolve. "We have looked up at them for all our history. Through every night they were there, guiding sailors home and cradling dreams. Even now I lift my tired eyes to them and know they must shine on somewhere." Her voice was intimate, as if she was speaking to a dear friend across the light years. "If you see a star on the horizon, know that once a human raised their face to you and sent this message." Telish almost reached out as if to catch one of those stars, but only found the curved glass of the viewport instead. Her heart settled into a hollow place. As the broadcast continued, Mira's tone shifted to introspection. "My planet's last hours felt infinite," she confided. "We counted the final beats of our days like one would count stars in the sky. I remember my daughter's laughter echoing in empty rooms, the way she held my hand even as we both stared into that dying light. We didn't cry much. Tears seem useless when everything you love is slipping away. But we sang. We sang our old lullabies to the silence. I sang to her about worlds where the sun never dies, and in those moments, for a breath, we almost believed it." A distant anguish echoed in her words that even the aliens felt in the pit of their chests. One by one, the crew felt memories not their own, lost lunches with family, songs left unsung. Mira paused, letting the mechanical clatter of the transmitter fill the air for a moment. Silence became part of the message, as telling as her words. Then softly, with a voice nearly breathless, "We tried every way to save our world. Our brightest minds tried to coax our sun back to life, as one would try to resuscitate a dying ember. But it was gone. Not with a blast of glory. Not with a final flare of hope. It simply wasn't there anymore." The phrasing was shockingly quiet for such a horror. Our sky turned dark like a broken mirror, no longer reflecting any light. We do not know what devoured it. A catch in her voice made the static hover. Some spoke of an impossible darkness, hungry and eternal, as if the universe finally heard our cries and answered with silence. The aliens shifted uneasily as they interpreted the implication. They had known of star deaths, supernovae exploding in brilliant cascades of energy, black holes rippling space with gravitational fury. But this was different. It was as if the very concept of a star was forgotten. In this story, a sun had simply blinked out, leaving nothing but darkness. The idea of a purposeful hunger in the vacuum of space chilled them to their core. On the speakers, Mira continued without pause. "On the night everything ended, we huddled under telescopes and old radio dishes. People pointed cameras at the sky, hoping for a miracle that would not come. I watched the void. And there, just beyond the range of sight, I thought I saw something move, a flicker of shadow where a sun should have been. But the image was gone in an instant, as though it never existed. There was no debris, no crater, only this silence. Now the only evidence left is this message." The static flickered as if despair crackled through wires. Telish imagined the dark wave of whatever had taken the sun and felt a shiver. When Mira spoke of the final transmission, her tone took on a resolute sadness. "In our final breaths, we sent this voice out across the sky like a bottle in the cosmic ocean. I hoped, sometimes in my naivety, that someone, anyone, might find it someday. We encoded not just our knowledge, but our memories and our longing. I have spoken words hoping they would find ears that understand what it means to love and to lose. She swallowed, and her quiet strength faltered. If you hear this message, know that we wished deeply to still be alive. But if only one soul ever hears these words, let it be enough. Let it carry our story among the stars. Perhaps it is small, but your hearts are as big as ours. Across the alien faces, eyes glistened. They, who had listened to so many voices from dying worlds, felt the sincerity in every syllable. Listening to these last human confessions, the crew of the Secral felt a profound kinship in their solitude. Among them were scholars of cosmic history, philosophers, artists, and dreamers. Now, tensely, they were hearing the final narrative of another world. The radio engineer wiped grease off a console, realizing his hands were shaking. The linguist repeated her translations quietly. We were here, and we are sorry. The simple sentiment bridged the gulf between species. It was as if Mira's soul spoke through the crackling transmission, holding the hand of every listener across centuries. The recording stuttered, approaching its end. Mira's voice became more fragile, as if she were expending all her remaining warmth in this farewell. I have lived through the end of our era, yet I am not afraid. Whatever else might be out there, if anyone picks up this voice, know this. We were here. We loved, we created beauty, we hoped, and we remembered. I want so badly for someone to hear me. Not just the sounds of my words, but the meaning behind them. To know that even in our final moments, we did not lose our humanity. The quiet conviction in her tone brought a tear to Talicia's cheek. Finally, Mira's last words arrived in a whisper. I place my hand on this transmitter, on this last piece of us, and I will not know what comes after. Perhaps you will find meaning in my voice, or perhaps it will fade into the void. Either way, let it be a witness. Here, in the silence once more. We were here. Goodbye. Her tone was soft, accepting, a final note that resonated like a distant bell. When the last breath of static faded, the control room was utterly still. The crew sat in darkness except for the glow of holoscreens and the distant stars outside their windows. The story had ended. Silence fell heavy between them. Talish let her breath out slowly, feeling the echo of the word goodbye drift like cold wind through the cabin. It's over, she whispered, as if afraid to disturb the hush. Chief Historian Ilmaris finally exhaled. It is over, he echoed, unable to think of anything more to say. They had expected to feel wonder, perhaps triumph at discovery. Instead, they felt sorrow and shock at realizing another civilization's life had ended in such emptiness. The silence after Mira's farewell felt strangely physical, as though something was missing. One by one, they struggled to find meaning in their own emotions. Captain Sorvin broke the quiet, voice low and firm. We need to analyze everything. Every part of this recording could be important. She needed not only answers, but reassurance. The crew set to work. Ilmaris and the linguist huddled to cross-reference translations. Great silence, devoured, we were here. Memory and data merged in scribbled notes. Others mapped constellations and probed archives for star surveys. The word extinction in one translation, great void in another. They padded their estimates, fearing any misinterpretation. The name Great Silence hung between them like a shiver. They listened to that phrase again and again. To them, their own emptiness had been of light cut short. This was something beyond their understanding. To these aliens, humanity now existed only as signals and star charts. As Ilmaris said softly, all we have is this voice. A solemn question came from the youngest crew member, an astrophysicist named Riva, her eyes distant. If this darkness took their sun, what does it mean for other stars out there? The answer was blank in their data. It could be hope. Perhaps it was isolated. Or doom, meaning the threat might still wander, waiting. None wished to entertain that possibility. Telish recalled an old saying in her language, "Where there is silence, listen even more closely." As the crew pored over the recording, one engineer noticed something strange. Pharos, the xenotechnology expert, frowned at the spectrogram of the signal. "Something about the signal itself feels off," he murmured. At first, no one else noticed. They were busy translating. But Pharos watched a particular pattern in the spectrum. It was complex, almost too structured to be random interference. He scrutinized it. There, woven under Mira's voice, were ripples, fractal curves nested inside the static, shifting with a subtle rhythm. "It doesn't match any natural phenomenon we know. It's embedded in the transmission itself." The crew exchanged alarmed glances. Ilmaris whispered, "A message within a message, or a hitchhiker hidden in the waves." The idea seemed impossible under known physics, but their instruments showed undeniable anomalies. The consoles displayed looping variations that matched no stellar or instrumental pattern. "Maybe it's just leftover cosmic noise," one engineer offered hesitantly. Telish remembered how Mira had spoken of no debris, only silence and riddles. If there was something else in the darkness that took the sun, could it have hitched a ride on this broadcast? Pharos considered the possibility in stunned silence. "Could be a code, or even a particle or wave riding on the radio waves," he said, voice barely more than a breath. But the charts showed more. The relay computers now paused after each transmission and wrote something. Eridus, the ship's AI, usually humming in efficiency, had started scribbling strings of nonsensical code on the holodisplay. It was as if the AI had dreams, images flickering on its lenses in rapid sequences. The AI's normally calm voice crackled with bits of laughter and static poetry, whispering lines in old Earth languages. "All the stars go dim. Awake, awake." Telish found herself stepping back. The data felt alive. The hidden pattern seemed to twist in slower, hypnotic spirals. The lights in the control room flickered to its rhythm. Pharos felt it too, a prickly sensation as if something unseen was brushing against his consciousness. "This signal is more than a story," he said gravely. "It's carrying something else." Captain Sorvin stood and called for quiet. "Report," she demanded. Pharos pointed at the displays, his finger, trembling over the anomaly. "These patterns keep appearing in the memory banks. The AI, it's responding to something in the code. It's as if the message brought a visitor aboard." A murmur crept through the crew. The phrase "brought a visitor" gave them all a chill. They felt the truth weigh on them. They had listened to a voice from the void, and it was whispering back. No one fully understood what was happening, and none wanted to admit the growing fear. Yet something had changed. The lights dimmed. A clock on the console ticked a second off slightly too late. Outside, the stars continued their silent motion, ignorant. The Sekrul, once alone with its crew, was no longer just a ship. It had a stranger on board, transmitted but tangible. That night, as twin suns set behind distant horizons, the crew of the Sekrul gathered in uneasy groups. Each had been touched by the recording in their own way, but now each sat haunted by the aftermath. Telish found herself alone on the observation deck, hands folded behind her back, staring at the inky black tapestry dotted with stars. She remembered Mira's last word, "Goodbye." It echoed in the dark sky, final and gentle. Somewhere out there, among these silent lights, lay the world that Mira watched flicker out. Below, the barren planet shimmered in the last red rays of the alien sun. Talish knew they would soon depart, leaving it as a headstone among many. Yet something held her gaze. A faint shimmer at the edge of perception, as if each drop of light beyond carried a secret. She imagined that somehow Mira's voice was carrying a darkness too, a vine of silence crawling up the ship's hull with every data packet. Back in the data core, Pharos discovered something even more unsettling. The ship's AI, Eridus, had been silently cataloging the hidden patterns. Now, late that night, it began to churn with new energy. A fractal display emerged on Eridus's holoscreen, an algorithmic spiral echoing the shapes in the transmission. The pattern slowly rotated as if alive. It looked like a labyrinth woven from light and shadow. "Eridus, identify that signal," Pharos ordered, though his voice wavered. The AI's usual response was a steady stream of technical language. Instead, after a pause, it stuttered. "Error. Signal not recognized. Pattern outside database." It repeated in a humming echo. "Not recognized. Not in my data." It was as if the AI itself were bewildered by what it had seen. Talish, watching the exchange from afar, felt a prickle of fear run up her spine. The AI, built to know everything about the stars, was encountering something unknown, something that had just arrived inside their ship. The next morning, as the pale twin suns of this system crept up, inexplicable anomalies mounted. The console screens glitched with multicolored noise. A navigation alarm blinked briefly, though no system had actually failed. Eridus, now silent on that odd tone, displayed random strings of characters that translated to cryptic phrases: "All lights away, echo endless." The computer almost seemed to be reciting poetry or prophecy. Talish saw one phrase repeat on a maintenance screen: "In silence, we listen." It was the same phrase Mira had once spoken about the stars. This was no ordinary glitch. The crew scrambled to isolate the source. They found the code embedded within the modules playing Mira's recording. Even though playback had stopped days ago, pieces of the signal were replicating in memory banks like a whispering virus. "It's like a virus," said one technician in awe. "But it doesn't crash anything, it just whispers." The word whispers seemed to flutter through the ship. The AI continued in its mechanical monotone, reading it out. "Whispers, whispers." Captain Sorvin ordered all external transmissions off. "We must ensure nothing goes out except on our terms," she commanded sharply. They feared more than anything that this silent presence might escape into the darkness between stars. A strangled nod went around. The silence on the open line of space suddenly felt precious and fragile. Talish, alone again on the observation deck that evening, gazed into the void. The planet below was a dull sphere of gray, lifeless but at peace. Above, Orion's belt hung bright in the alien sky. She could not shake the feeling that Mira's message was more than tragedy. It was a warning. Perhaps the darkness that took that sun was now hiding in the bones of this broadcast. The voice on loop brought solace, but the silence that followed held something entirely different. Days later, the Sequel finally set course to leave. Its great sails unfurled, catching starlight. The barren world receded slowly behind them. The pale blue dot that once was Earth, now lost to history. On the final night before. Departing, the crew gathered once more for a vigil. Talish invited them to share thoughts, but none spoke. Words seemed too prosaic now. Instead, together they listened to Mira's message start from the beginning, each familiar line washing over them anew. When it finished, Talish spoke quietly. She said our story is now hers. She entrusted us with her memory. Ilmaris replied softly, voice thick with emotion. We will carry it. He placed a hand against the thick viewport glass, looking at the stars beyond. She spoke of all those lights. We will not forget that now. In the soft light of the constellation they once called Cassiopeia, they found comfort in each other's presence. As the Sekrul jumped to faster than light, the engines humming truth into space, the crew faced forwards. Mira's voice on loop was a ghostly lullaby then, but now only remained in data logs and quiet hearts. Talish gazed one last time at the constellation, wondering how many eyes watched those same stars. She remembered Mira's farewell. No curse, no despair, only acceptance of silence and hope it held. Whatever hitchhiker they had taken aboard with that signal, it would remain unseen by those lights. Yet somewhere, far ahead, beyond even known charts, the faint undertones of the last human broadcast continued to pulse. They had learned humanity's final word, but now bore witness to its aftershock, an echo in the dark that had begun its own quiet journey among them. The question lingered, unanswered. Had they truly been alone?